Hi, my name is Christine Lamothe, President of Perennial Talent, and today I have the pleasure of facilitating a discussion with our guest panelists on reducing bias in selection processes. Hiring bias can really reduce the benefits of a diverse workforce, such as employee productivity, satisfaction, and collaboration, to name a few. And there is a multitude of reasons to build towards a more diverse workforce. But before we can do so, we must understand, I think, and break down the barriers our hiring biases compose. I think if you're hiring based on, that gut feeling, you're likely hiring on the basis of unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is really known also as implicit biases, and they're really the underlying attitudes and stereotypes people unconsciously attribute to another person or a group of people that affect, I think, really how we understand and engage with a person or a group. There's so many unconscious biases, as we know, to name a few, like halo effect, age, gender bias, name bias, etc. So today, to discuss this topic, I have invited a stellar guest panel that will share their thoughts, their experience, and advice on how to reduce bias from selection processes. So let's start with a roundtable introduction of our panel. Tony, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. It is a stellar panel. I probably bring it closer to the mean, but I am global head of talent for a company called Sampo International. We are a property and casualty commercial insurer, US, Bermuda, UK, and our parent company is based out of Japan. And so I have all kind of talent initiatives, as well as I'm the business partner to our insurance practice. And thanks for inviting me.
Welcome, Tony. Andre.
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much. Andre Jones here, Vice President of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Learning with Jellyfish, digital media and marketing agency. Under my purview is all D&I strategies across the globe, 32 countries, over 150 markets, and supporting people development strategies as well, really serving as a bridge to connect the two, focusing on creating an inclusive culture.
Welcome, Andre. Jeannie.
Thanks. My name is Jeannie White, and I'm the Director of Employee Experience for SimCorp. And I just want to say, fascinating with the global reach that you guys have. We are in Canada only, and which is great. We're a link to the financial industry. We're owned by TD, BMO, and Royal Bank, and we're headed in Mississauga. So part of my role is talent acquisition, as well as diversity and inclusion, internal communications, policies, and programs. So it's a bit of a unique role, but it's an awesome role as well.
Welcome, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Svetlana.
Hi, I'm Svetlana Gedrishtin. I am part of One Main Financial. We are a US-based consumer lending firm all throughout the US. We do a lot of lending to the near prime market. I'm based in New Jersey, and as the head of organizational development and learning, I look after performance management, talent reviews, succession planning, all of our professional leadership and management development programs, as well as a lot of the D&I efforts.
Well, welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so looking forward to this discussion. So let's get started. Svetlana, how can unconscious bias, you think, affect hiring decisions?
Great question. I remember reading from David Rock and hearing him talk about unconscious bias, and the way he framed it is, if you have a brain, you are biased. All of us come with natural biases, and watching out for that very intentionally, very thoughtfully, and very proactively in the recruitment and selection process is really critical. Christine, you named a number of biases. I'd add first impression bias or similar to me bias, which get in the way. And what winds up happening is we select talent that are perhaps not as good, or perhaps don't add to the diversity of thought and perspectives that come into the organization, which then ultimately impact our ability to produce, to create better outcomes, to drive better results, to retain, and to bring in other new talent. So I think the risk of bringing in folks who are similar to me and are a great fit, because it's all we know, bringing in folks where we're replacing like for like, and we're replacing a role based on what that individual had before, as opposed to thinking about broader talent needs and broader talent opportunities for where we're looking to go, can really undermine us and our abilities to do what we're trying to do from a strategic perspective.
Very good points. Andre.
No, those are some very great points. And, you know, something that I would add to that is the fact that sometimes these types of decisions really impacts an organization's ability to align their values and capabilities in the right way. I think the hiring decision that's made and the recruiting process that connects with it is really the portal to employer branding. And what happens with it, it limits an organization's ability to comprehensively establish, I think, a brand that's not only respected externally, but sometimes it's not respected internally because your values don't align. So that's something that I would add to what was said earlier.
Good points. Jeannie.
Yeah, those are really great points. And if I could just add, what I've noticed lately that is a bit of a risk and could increase unconscious bias in the recruiting process is our new reality of being virtual. So I used to, if I was going for an interview right now, I would be coming into your space in my best suit, everything else. And you can see my background, and I'm going to be honest here, I did set up a few things in the background. So you might just assume on my background that, okay, maybe I have children because I have Barbie and Grover. I have a dog. Perhaps I even like to maybe drink a little. So these are some things now that we didn't have before that I think are now coming in to the forefront a little more. And by the way, the only thing true in that is I have a dog. So, and
Good dog. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's something that's been, you know, coming on my mind lately is this, the new reality of how we're recruiting and what new unconscious biases can creep in.
Very good points. Tony.
Yeah, I'm batting cleanup here. I enjoyed everyone's input and particularly Jeannie, like bringing two truths and a lie to the virtual environment. Very cool. I think all of that's very applicable. I think, in some ways, the virtual environment maybe has increased unconscious bias because, again, we've gotten to a place, which I think is a real positive culturally, that you're bringing your whole self. But my whole self may not be for you. Like I have Bills gear behind me. If I'm interviewing with a New England Patriots fan, I'm being flip here. I'm probably not getting that job, particularly after last year. So I think it's important. Bias has been around since the beginning of time. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad word if we acknowledge it and work to combat it. And I think we'll talk about that some through the additional questions.
Yeah, very good points. And unconscious biases mean people sometimes aren't aware, right? We're not aware of that. And I think the first step is to start by becoming aware of the different ones that we might have. Because when you talk about that to sometimes other people, they will deny that they have that. But we, like you all stated, we all have them. If we have a brain, like you said, Svetlana, we've got a bias there because all of us have that. So, Andre, why is a diverse workforce important to business success?
That's an amazing question. We can talk days for this one. So, listen, there's no doubt. There's research out there that shows that a diverse workforce will multiply innovation and creativity. In most instances, a diverse team would expand and increase your client pool, if you will.
Mhm.
But listen, I think the most influential aspect of having a diverse workforce is that you set your workforce and your business up for sustainability. You're able to create not only new products or solutions for your organization,
Mhm.
but you're less susceptible to the impact
Mhm.
of change when your team is diverse. There's research also that shows that a diverse team is able to withstand people leaving from the group or significant change management initiatives that might take place within the organization. So I don't know about you. I think that's really fortunate for an organization to be able to introduce change and have teams that are able to successfully manage through change and still maintain successful attributes and efforts along the way.
Very good point. Jeannie.
Yeah, Andre, that's great. And I actually wouldn't have thought of using the term sustainable so I think that's really great. And I've noted that down. But yes, definitely for the success of the organization, because I think when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's about, yes, people bringing their whole selves to work, but also bringing diversity of thought. So they're bringing their different backgrounds, their different experiences, and we can continue to learn as an organization from each other if we have that diversity. If we're all like-minded, we're probably going to just stay stuck,
Mhm.
right? As opposed to this wide range of diversity. So I think it's vital for an organization for sure.
Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the tether to learning is a really good one, because if we think about, on a personal level, if you've ever been exposed to somebody who is different from you, or, I do a lot of facilitation in classes, the stuff of ideas comes out of the richness of those different experiences. And that is the win here. It's the ideas, it's the different solutions, we all get enriched by learning something new. And we all come from different places. So it's, you have to balance. I always have to balance my frustration because it seems so obvious, yet it's become, particularly in the insurance industry, it's taken so long to even get here. And now we see progress, but we have so much to do. So I think that's a way to take it down to an individual level that's meaningful for people.
Svetlana.
I echo everything that's been said. I think, Andre, you opened it up so beautifully. There have been so many studies. I was looking at McKinsey recently, and almost a decade worth of research shows that gender diverse teams outperform others by 15 to 25%. Ethnically diverse teams outperform others by 33 to 36%. So innovation, collaboration, all of those things are wonderful outcomes when we're striving to be more diverse, when we're striving to be more inclusive. And Jeannie, you talked about kind of folks being alike. I think one of the most dangerous things for me in teams is groupthink. When we all fall into the same pattern and we keep going, we're not disrupting, we're not innovating, we're not bringing in new or novel perspectives, we're not elevating anything that we're doing. And so how do you break that out? It's encouraging it and making space for those diverse thoughts and making sure that we're embedding that into creating better decisions for the company.
Excellent point. What are some of the measures needed, do you think, to reduce bias in the selection process? Jeannie, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to admit it's a tough question too, because it's hard to do. And I think we spoke earlier, it's about awareness for one. I think that it starts there, really becoming aware that we have it, because as we heard, everybody with a brain has it. So I think having people understand what it is the first step. and then learning to overcome those, right? And there are some things that you can do, whether it's something like a blind hiring or the training around it, and then even standardizing some of the questions that you're going to ask candidates, and what are the measures of those questions. So some standardization definitely would help in that, but I think it all starts with awareness, 100%.
You're so right. Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, they're really good points. I like Holy Trinity. So I wrote down awareness, advocacy, and action. And I think in the hiring or the selection process, you always want to balance. I'm a big fan of giving managers flexibility, but I think having structure around the interview process and being robust about that helps with some of it. Up to and including feedback, making sure you have a diverse slate of interviewers. And in a talent HR role, I think you can help advocate for that and make that easy and not bureaucratic. And I think that's where it starts, as well as just, geez, why don't we have a diverse pipeline to start with? That'll certainly help.
Very good point. Svetlana?
I think everything you guys have mentioned is excellent. What I would add on is making sure that we have not just the consistent criteria to evaluate candidates along with a diverse slate, but reminding people to take notes during the interviews as just a basic best practice, because our memories get fuzzy, especially if we're seeing candidates over a span of several weeks, if not months. And why we like someone, suddenly we have a halo or horns effect that's forming, and we're generalizing as opposed to going back to the real data. So reminding folks to do that. I think the other is reminding folks that the job description we initially created is just a wish list. And we have to be flexible and adjust. When we have the right candidate who has the right attitude, we can train the skill. But we have to make sure that it's someone who comes in with a growth mindset, an inclusive mindset, and can bring a perspective that perhaps is not there or complementary to the team. Those are the folks we need to grab onto. So it's the consistent criteria, the right folks at the table, training and supporting managers, but also making sure we're not getting too stuck and getting in our own way with getting the right folks in.
That's right. Thanks, Svetlana. Andre, last word on that.
No, listen, that's a comprehensive list. And so I'm going to put a bow on a few of those. And I love it. So in terms of your pipeline, I want to say, if you really want to change it and reduce the bias in the selection process, first and foremost, start advertising, going where underrepresented talent is. That's important. To allocate recruiting budget and spend based upon one or two sources, it may not be enough. So go to where they are. Number two, communicate the way that they want to be communicated with. When you think about your employer brand, if you haven't studied it to create some type of understanding regarding how people see you in your workplace, if you haven't at least taken a look at your website to see truly if you have pictures that are diverse, you're probably not doing enough. That's low-hanging fruit. Something else that Svetlana talked about was, scoring and taking notes. Put a button on it, add a rubric. Because if someone rated someone a 4, another person came in pretty much a 2, then the question is, where are your notes? I think the rubric really helps support accountability, because again, your bias shows up a number of ways. And one of the ways that you can check it is to have that rubric and then to be able to engage in a conversation. Diverse panels. There was one school of thought that said, well, if you had diverse panel reviews or interviews, there's a marginal tax that you're putting on people. Forget that. If you have diversity in your organization, then you can leverage the diverse panel. But here's the catch. A lot of organizations aren't diverse enough to even have a diverse panel. So therefore, you have to see diversity through the lens of, as it was said earlier, thinking. And you also have to see it through the lens of capability, because if diversity isn't truly reflected in your organization, see beyond color and face and start challenging how your organization is thinking about the selection process. And last but not least, there's 2 other quick points. One, a lot of organizations say we're hiring for values. Values change, but we're hiring for job fit. Roles evolve. Here's what you want to do. Think about future capabilities. Are you hiring today for tomorrow? because that's the shortest curve to reducing retention in your organization, and it matches really well if you're focused on employee experience. And last but not least, finally, this is important. A lot of a lot of talent acquisition teams are stretched. Okay. And you rely upon sourcing through agencies. Well, if you're truly intentional about removing unconscious bias from your recruiting processes and you're working with agencies, hold them accountable. If you're noticing that you're receiving a certain type of talent within your interview process from sourcing agencies, which is really enabling your bias to be successful during the selection process, guess what? Let them know that you're really focusing on creating more of a diverse workforce. They play a role in it. You want to see a stronger level of contribution from them. And that will help to change the type of candidate you interview and create stronger awareness regarding the biases within your process. So that's just a little button in a bow around some of those. And it was an awesome conversation, I think.
Excellent, excellent advice. We are seeing more, and we're recommending that more and more to our client to do like an audit of their selection process to see what kind of tools are they using, where are they recruiting from, job description, all the things that you've mentioned. And that's why I love competencies, and that's why we're in the business of competencies, to clearly define it in terms of behavior. And the points that you were making in terms of rating, not taking enough notes, how can you assess fairly, the responses of the candidate if they have not really talked about the points you're scoring on in terms of what they did and the results that they've gotten, to make sure when we're talking about fit, do they have the capacity, the capability, to be able to do the role. So there's so many things that can be done, I think, to improve, our hiring processes so they're free of bias. So those were great, great thoughts. My last question to the panel, what advice do you have for other HR professionals who are looking to make more effective hiring decision and increase diversity? Svetlana, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. I think it's to really get ahead of it and be intentional in a very proactive way. I think oftentimes we start to scramble when we're seeing candidates come in and they're not diverse enough. How do we make sure that we're talking to agencies? How do we make sure that we're looking at the language we're using in the job description so that we're not potentially alienating or dismissing certain audiences that may be attracted to the role otherwise? So how can we get ahead of it? How do we make sure that we're talking to our diverse slate of folks and asking them what topics to focus on so that we're thinking about it holistically and we're getting a holistic view of the individual versus going back to the same patterns or the same questions or the same topics, or letting each person choose the questions they want to ask because that's what's comfortable for them. So how do we structure it in a thoughtful, holistic way, proactively, as opposed to scrambling in the middle of it when we're realizing we're not getting the right candidates or there's something missing that's gone down south?
Okay, thank you. Andre.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it consistent with what was given there. With in the presence of all of those practices there, control what you can control, and that's your own unconscious bias. First, check and monitor where you are, and determine what type of biases might creep up in your connection to the processes. And if you start there, that's a great place to hold yourself accountable. But most importantly, you can take that awareness and begin to influence the processes or the systems, or amazingly enough, if you can, the culture that you're working in. So I always place the onus on the individual. If you want to change something, start with you first, and then build a conviction to spread.
Great advice. Jeannie?
Yeah, that's great. Definitely start with you. And I'm going to take it a little bit of a step further as well. Start with yourself, but also don't do it in isolation in your own team. because I mean, we can bring in the, you know, the most diverse talent out there, but if our culture doesn't support it, if our, you know, our succession planning doesn't support it, so it's just one piece, I think, in the holistic view of D&I in the organization. And then I think Andre touched on it earlier too, like, what is your brand out there? What's your talent brand? And then partnering with those organizations that can help you too, whether that's you know, an Aboriginal community or just the different communities that are underrepresented, and partner with them because they're the experts too that can help you as an organization to be known as a diversity and inclusion. But I think, yeah, we have to engage our other teams, whether it's other HR, even our marketing teams, so that it's throughout the organization.
Great point, Jeannie. Tony, you have the last word.
Oh man, that doesn't happen in my house ever. So I think those are all really good points. There's so I have raging social science crushes on people, and one of them is a guy named Adam Grant, and he has a podcast called Work Life, and he actually, the subject was bias this week, so you should check that out. But in there, he said something that I found interesting, which I knew, which is you know, efforts to build awareness within companies. The percentage of leadership that is required to attend that is like stunningly low. So when I think about giving advice to HR professionals, it has to start with us, but I think it also has to start with leadership, because if leadership is not walking the walk, why are we, you know, again, employees will see that. Everyone sees that. So I think it starts there. And I think, you know, both individually and organizationally, it should be a little bit uncomfortable. If it isn't uncomfortable, you're not doing it. If you're not being vulnerable, you're not really doing it. And if you're not learning something, you're not really doing it. So I think that inventory of individually first, but then organizationally, and being honest with yourself is a good place to start, because we can make little impacts. But I think my concern with the D&I space has been, at a lot of companies, it's heralded with this great fanfare, and you look back 2 years later and say, nothing's changed. That has to be fixed for us to succeed as a, you know, as a society, as a company, as individuals. And I think that's the driving force here.
That is such a great point to end on as well. There's no point in putting all of these initiatives on. You need to monitor it to make sure it's happening, so you get to see the kinds of results, you know, we're looking for in that. So those were such great points and advice. I really, really, you know, am going to engage with my partner. As a matter of fact, Dr. Dan Van Der Werf, who's my partner, he's in Toronto. And he will be delivering a live 45-minute training session on how to detect and combat, you know, interview bias for hiring manager on June the 4th at noon, our time, Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. If you want to attend, just check out our Perennial Talent website to register. And on that note, I want to thank every one of you for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, and of course, that great advice that can help our listeners deal with some of the biases that they have in their hiring process. Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.